So I will start at first. So thanks, Mario.
You're welcome.
I hope everyone hears me without a mic.
Yes.
Wonderfully. So welcome to our first meetup after nearly 2 years. Thanks for joining us. We are a quite small group today, as you see, because we try to follow some regulations and also that we try to make a safe environment for all of you. That's why we have some rules. I think you read it already. You get your check on front. Try to wear a mask if you don't drink something. That would be my wish. I know it's hard, even if the rules changing tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow. No, Friday. But nevertheless, try to make it safe for everyone. Even if you are not influenced, try to help some other people. Nevertheless, so like I said, it's the first one in March this year after 2 years that we have a meetup. So what we have here. So as you know already, since last half year, we are missing speakers. So if you have, I think in the last 2 years, probably most of you learned something new in your job or in your free time, and you want to present something to share your knowledge, which you gained also here sometimes, try to send in a talk so we can have some more sessions for the next, because the pipeline currently is totally empty. In the last 2 years, we got nearly no one sent a talk to us. We try to get some remote ones, but if we want to have it in person again, we need some more persons here in Berlin to do some sessions, and not just like Ahmed today helping us out with the remote session he offers us today. That's why scan the QR code or use talk.berlindroid.de to send in a proposal. Probably in the future, if we have some more proposals, again, we also put some more effort into that. We try to move on to sessionize with all the call for papers for us. But that's currently just in the backyard of our heads, in the backlog, that we probably try to go that way. Like I said, Ahmed will present us today something from XML to Compose and his journey, how he did it for his application up next, which then was also published on the site of Google Dev Library. So to have an example how Compose should work. And I think the last slide, there's a flea market, which we will do after the session, also without a recording. So we can talk freely and then do more socializing today than having sessions, because I think most of you are here today, not for the sessions, but also to talk with some people and to mingle a little bit. That's why we had a big place for that. I don't know when we have to leave here.
Yes.
Okay, we will have to leave. And today, but the time we will discuss without beer. Nevertheless, like I said, the flea market we'll have later on. And you see probably in the bottom, and maybe so the official planned one is, of course, like always, the last Wednesday in the month. So it will be the 27th of April. But if we don't have a session, we won't have a meeting. So think about that and offer us something. And that, I think I will hand over to Ahmed at first. Thank you. Please. Sorry, I think most of you don't see anything. I will come to you. I will do that. Hopefully you will see some people now. And you will do it also later on, that we leave it like that for the real session. And I just wanted to thank Maria. He wants to give you some words from GoPro as our host, and I will hand over at least for 3 to 4 minutes that we can talk about GoPro, what that is, what they want to offer, and why we are here today. I have no idea. He probably gives us some more insights. That's all.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ahmed. Yeah, so hi. Most of you know me. I'm Mario. I'm working here at Hubraum now. We are the tech incubator for Deutsche Telekom. But what does this all mean? Do you feel this feeling, this nibbling feeling? This is the 5GSA network running through this facility we have here. So this is one setup where you can already test out the 5G standalone network before it comes live in a year. And if you want to actually explore your apps onto these networks, just come to me, talk to me, and we have like dedicated testing session where we tell you those are the APIs you can be using. This is the network, how it will be working. And otherwise, now to the more important parts is like there will be pizza at 8. So you have to stay till at least 8. I'm so sorry for this one. But in the meantime, you can have drinks to the side, like the fridges are open for you. And one other thing, if you happen to have to go to a place where you get rid of the drinks, the toilets are down there through the hall, like down, open the door, then to the left or to the right, depending on your preference. Leerflaschen, you just leave them somewhere and then you pick them up. And there's something else.
Some crates are there.
And there are some crates you can put them in. Thanks. That's it.
So you don't search new employees?
We are currently not looking for new employees at the Chrome, at least not for my department. And with this one, you see a bit more of my belly, and I stop sharing so you can, Ahmed.
No worries.
You can use your power now.
Nice. Okay, I'll share. Can you see the slides?
No.
Yes.
Awesome.
The stage is yours.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for having me tonight. My talk is titled From XML to Compose, which will be talking about my journey of transforming existing
Why are you
large
frozen?
Android app.
Sorry, I
Am I
pressed a
frozen?
button. That's now you are unfrozen. I should stop pressing buttons. Please try again.
No worries. All right. Yeah, I'll try again. So, hey, everyone. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm usually honored. Yeah, so my talk is titled From XML to Compose, which talks about my journey of transforming an existing large Android app to Jetpack Compose. I am Ahmed Tikiwa. I'm a senior software engineer at a company called Luno. I specialize in Android. I've been a software engineer since 2010. And Android has been my passion for a huge part of that journey. So going straight in, why Compose? So most Android development, including my own, included defining layouts using at least one XML file. This XML file would contain a tree of UI widgets constituting an Android view hierarchy. If the user interacts with the screen, for example, this would result in a change in the app state and thus a need for the UI hierarchy to be updated to display the current data representing the change state. However, to update the UI, a function such as find view by ID is used to go through the hierarchy tree, and then the internal state of the node, which is the UI widget, is updated through functions like setText or addChild. This manual change of the UI widget is very error prone. For example, trying to set a value to a node that has already been removed from the UI, thus resulting in an unintended exception. The more views that are part of the application, the higher the level of complexity. So Jetpack Compose was created with the intent to simplify the above and instead accelerate the way in which we develop our UIs using less code and benefiting from a list of powerful tools all in Kotlin. In other words, no more XML defined views, which is referred to as the imperative approach. Rather, your views are now defined in the Kotlin code, referred to as the declarative approach, which means you describe your UI. So what are other companies saying about Compose? So at Monzo, they're saying it's much easier to trace through code when it's all written in the same language, that language being Kotlin, and often the same file, rather than jumping back and forth between Kotlin and XML. At Twitter, they said the following: our theming layer is vastly more intuitive and legible. We've been able to accomplish within a single Kotlin file what otherwise extended across multiple XML files, that were responsible for attribute definitions and assignments via multiple layered theme overlays. So when was Jetpack Compose introduced? I first heard about Jetpack Compose when it was announced as a preview by Google at I/O in 2019. At the time, this is what Karen had to say about Jetpack Compose. One of the areas we never solved was UI. We really wanted to look at how could you make it super simple to develop UI. Then Leland Richardson had these thoughts. What I think is once people start seeing Compose in action, it really becomes a delightful thing to program. So like any developer, I was excited as I was already using Jetpack libraries extensively as part of my development, with a new one which was being added to further accelerate or speed up my development with even less code. Though I was excited, I was also trying not to feel overwhelmed at the prospect of learning a whole new way of writing UI, as the imperative approach is what I was used to for many years. I also delayed learning Jetpack Compose until recently. So, learning Compose. I started learning Jetpack Compose through the course on the Android developers website, which takes you through step by step into understanding the inner workings of Compose, from thinking in Compose, the basics, navigation, theming, animation, integrating into existing apps, all this through articles, videos, and code labs. The course also has a short quiz at the end to test your understanding of Compose, and it includes a Jetpack Compose badge, which will be added to your developer profile on successful completion. In addition to this, as I'm a visual learner and with a desire to thoroughly understand Jetpack Compose, I went through 2 paid Jetpack Compose courses on Udemy. This approach is, of course, totally optional. You don't have to do it, but the extra visual tutorials helped me. The first was a short course by Katalin Gita called Jetpack Compose Crash Course for Android with Kotlin. And then the second, and a more extensive course by Paolo De Shorne, which covers the Kotlin fundamentals for those who either need a refresher or are new to Kotlin, and a series of different apps to help solidify the Compose concepts and how all these components fit together, coupled with state management. So this course is titled Android Jetpack Course, the Comprehensive Bootcamp. And it was recently updated for 2022. So once I was done with my learnings mentioned above, my desire was to now implement Compose into my existing Android app, UpNext TV Series Manager. So about the app. I created UpNext TV Series Manager in 2015 as a passion project of mine, and it's been in production since and available for download from the Google Play Store. This app, as mentioned earlier, is an open source project, and it's officially part of the Google Developers Dev Library. The app boasts the following screens. It has a dashboard screen showing a schedule of shows that aired the previous day, the current day, and the next day, provided by the TV Maze API. A search screen allowing the user to search for shows with the results displayed in a clickable list of cards with data provided by the TV Maze API. Then it also has an explore screen showing the currently popular, trending, and most anticipated shows provided by the Trackit API. It also has a show detail screen showing a summary of the show, cast information, a rating breakdown from Trackit, previous and next episode information provided by TV Maze and Trackit APIs. Then it also has a list of seasons for a particular show displayed in a list of clickable cards with data provided by the TV Maze API. Then a list of episodes for a particular season displayed in a list of clickable cards with data provided by the TV Maze API as well. Then finally, there's a Trackit account screen, which displays one of 2 screens, depending on whether the user is logged into the account, to their Trackit account, or not. If the user is logged in, their list of UpNext favorited shows will be displayed on the screen. Adopting Compose, choosing the approach. So what makes Jetpack Compose so powerful is that it caters not only to developers creating new apps, but also to developers who have existing apps and would like to include Compose into it, like me. What makes the latter a possibility is the concept of interoperability. What this means is that Jetpack Compose code can live side by side with XML-based code. With that said, adoption can be done in one of 2 ways, according to the Android developers website. The first approach is called the bottom-up approach, which starts by migrating the smaller UI elements on the screen, like a button or a text view, followed by its view group elements until everything is converted to composable functions. Then the second one is the top-down approach, which starts by migrating the fragments or view containers like a frame layout, constraint layout, or recycler view, followed by the smaller UI elements on the screen. So what does interoperability actually look like? So each of my fragments has an XML layout view associated with it. Some screens also have an additional layout view for the recycler view items used by the respective recycler view adapter. As this is a gradual migration to Jetpack Compose, where I'm going screen by screen, I will be completely removing fragment files in future and have compose navigation, where the navigation will be from composable screen to composable screen, as opposed to the current fragment to fragment navigation. Then compose view makes it possible to introduce compose UI content into an existing XML layout. The compose view acts as a container to host the compose UI content, thus making it possible for Android views to coexist with compose UI in the same XML file. So continuing on with what interoperability looks like. I removed all the Android views, text views, recycler views, nested scroll view, constraint layout, linear progress indicator, and replaced them with a compose view. So this is how my layout file now looks. That's all that is contained a compose view inside it. Then once the app makes use of compose navigation, then the need for compose view will become redundant. Then this is how it looks in my fragment. So in using data binding, I referenced the compose view in order to set it up. So binding.compose container.apply. So there I'm referencing the compose view within my view. Then according to the documentation by default, whenever the view is detached from the window, compose disposes of the composition. Compose UI view types such as compose view and abstract compose view use a view composition strategy that defines this behavior to ensure unintended behavior and ensure that compositions are disposed of automatically when not needed. Then set view composition strategy is required. Without this, my app actually crashed as I navigated between the composable screens. So as you can see, that's how I'm defining it there in the code, set view composition strategy and passing in the view composition strategy, which is dispose on view tree lifecycle destroyed. Then the set content takes in a composable function as a parameter. In this case, the theme definition MDC theme, which is a dependency I added to UpNext TV Series Manager. And what MDC theme adapter does is basically it takes your existing XML-based themes and creates compose-based material design themes in the background for you. So if you don't have compose material-based themes defined in your app yet, MDC theme adapter can take care of that for you. And then once you have fully created those files, you can then, you no longer need the MDC theme adapter. So this allows me to bridge the gap between having my legacy type theme, XML theme-based files and having compose theme. So MDC theme adapter takes care of that. So it also takes another composable function, in this case, the composable screen, which is search screen, which is a composable that I created. So breaking down the changes, starting with the search screen. So my focus on the search screen was the following. I want to update the search bar to be a composable, update the search results list where I create a composable representing a single result item and then displaying the list of these single result items or composables representing a search result item. Then I will remove the recycler view adapter, its view holder, and item layout. So this is how I created the search screen composable, which is a function annotated with @composable. However, you ask, what is a composable? So Jetpack Compose is built around composable functions. And within these functions, you can define your app's UI programmatically by describing the UI of your app, how it should look, and also provide the data necessary to be displayed. You therefore no longer have to focus on the process of the UI's construction, such as initializing an element, attaching it to a parent, and so forth. You don't have to worry about that anymore. So for my composables that represent an entire screen, I like to add screen as part of the name. Also notice that the composable function name begins with an uppercase. This is the norm within Compose, to name your composable functions this way, so with a capital beginning letter. Then for dependency injection, I use Hilt in my app. And because my view models are Hilt view models, I can pass Hilt view model to allow my view model to be provided here to my search screen composable. The Hilt view model call is actually part of the Hilt navigation compose dependency, which I've added to UpNext DVC's manager. Then because the data in my view models is currently being returned as live data, I can transform that live data value into state using observer state, because composables require state in order for them to behave in a certain way. So every time there would be a new value posted into the live data, the returned state will be updated, causing a recomposition of every state.value usage. When I migrate UpNext navigation to compose navigation, I will then use the scaffold layout, which automatically provides slots for the app bar, the bottom bar, and even the floating action button. For now, a surface layout with a modifier as fill max size to occupy the whole screen will suffice for my use case. So composables can take a modifier, which is a companion object that can help you define properties such as padding or clickability and more for your composable. They're actually very handy, and you pretty much use them everywhere. Then the column composable arranges the composables contained inside it to be arranged vertically on the screen from top to bottom, as you can see there in the illustration on the left-hand side. Then I want to add a linear progress indicator, but in order to ensure that the list does not jump or shift position on the screen when the linear progress indicator is removed from the screen, I rather want to display the linear progress indicator on top of the list. That way, when it disappears, the list remains in its position. To achieve this, I use a box composable, which is the equivalent of a frame layout in the imperative approach. The box composable allows views to be on top of each other, as you can see there in the illustration on the left-hand side. Then inside the box composable, I have my custom composable called search area. Then I also have the linear progress indicator, which is only displayed if the loading state is true. So is loading is my state variable there, and I'm using that to determine whether the composable linear progress indicator is displayed on the screen or not. Then before I explain what's going on here, one concept is very important when it comes to composables. There's a concept of state hoisting, which is the process of moving state all the way up to the caller, and that way ensuring that composables are as stateless as possible. In my case, the caller is my screen, in other words, search screen, and then the composables below it need to hoist up the state to it as much as possible. There are times state hoisting isn't always possible. However, it is best practice to make sure your composables are as stateless as possible. As a general rule of thumb, state comes down the composables and events go up. When composables are stateless, it makes them easier to reuse and also easier to test. So my search area composable will represent the text field for entering the search query as well as the search results. It accepts 3 parameters, the search results list, and then 2 function arguments on text submit and on result click. These are events that the composable will respond to and hoist up the responsibility to the caller of search area, in this case, search screen, to decide what to do with that event. So on text submit will be invoked when the users enter the search query. This event is hoisted up from search form composable all the way up to search area. Then on result click is an event invoked when the user clicks on one of the search result items. This event is hoisted up from search results list composable all the way up to the search screen composable. So here's what my search form composable I created looks like. So on the left-hand side, that's how I'm calling it. And on the right-hand side, that's how I've defined it. So it has a mutable state variable called search query state. In order to ensure that the state survives the activity or process recreation using the saved instant state mechanism, I use remember savable. Now the user's query will be remembered in a state variable, And even if I rotate the device, this value will be remembered. Then my search form composable makes use of a search input field composable, which is a composable I created as a simple wrapper function around the material outline text field composable, which I will show in the next slide. Then the state variable search query state is then used in the input field. Initially, the value will be empty because it is initialized to an empty string. Then when the user types a value, the onValue change event is invoked, and the search query state value is updated and remembered. So here's what my search input field composable looks like. So on the left-hand side, that's how I'm calling it. And on the right-hand side, this is how I defined it. So as you can see, it calls the material outline text field composable, passing it the input label, the value state, which is a mutable state variable of type string. And then when the outline text field's onValue change is invoked, then the event is passed up, state hoisting, containing the new value of type string. My search result list composable takes two parameters, the list to be displayed and a function argument, which will be the onClick event containing the search result item. So this is how I'm calling it on the left-hand side, and the right-hand side is how I've defined it. So search results list then makes use of the lazy column, which is the equivalent of the recycler view, but more powerful under the hood. Also, with this, there is no requirement for adapters, view holders, and so forth. This is all I need. Lazy column and its other counterpart, the lazy row, simply take a list and inside the lambda, which is referred to as the lazy item scope, and then define which composable represents the column or row for that list. Similar to when you would create an XML layout for a view holder. This time you just create a composable that represents that column or row, and you pass it there within the scope. In the previous slide, where I showed the search screen composable, I didn't show the full implementation until I'd covered the above in order to make things clearer first. So this is the full call for the search area composable where a list is passed to it. And then when the search area composables on result click event is invoked, search screen will then call the nav controller as part of the Jetpack navigation library to navigate to the show details screen. So as you can see, search screen is the one that's responsible for handling the events because the event is coming up to it through state hoisting. So the fun part, the before and afters. So this is how the search fragment or the search screen looks like on the left-hand side using the XML-based approach. So you find that there's a toolbar or an app bar, bottom navigation bar, and then the search results in the middle. And this is how I've achieved it using Jetpack Compose. So I've got the search area composable, which encompasses the entire screen there. And then inside it, I've got the search form composable. And the search form composable represents the input area where the user will be typing in the query. And then I've got a composable called search results list, which is used to then display the list of the results that come back from the API. Then this is the dashboard screen. So on the left-hand side, there are 3 rows. There's the shows that aired yesterday, shows that airing today, and then shows that airing tomorrow below it. And this is how it looks using Jetpack Compose. So as I mentioned earlier, when I migrate to Jetpack Compose navigation, then I'm going to be using the scaffold layout where I'm going to be using the Compose app bar and the Compose bottom navigation bar. So what you see there, the app bar that you see there in the bottom navigation, that's still part of the old or the way of writing the app bar and toolbar that we're used to. So every content that you see in the middle there, that's purely Jetpack Compose. So when I upgrade it to the Jetpack Compose navigation, then I'll also replace the app bar and the bottom navigation bar. So on this particular screen, the dashboard screen, I'm using a composable called shows row, which uses the lazy row composable. And this actually allows me to have a list that's scrollable from left to right. So lazy row actually gives me that functionality. Then I'm able to use that same shows row composable on my shows airing today and shows airing tomorrow. So I'm able to reuse my composable in multiple areas of my app, which is one of the things which is recommended that you do within Jetpack Compose to make your composables as reusable as possible. Then this is how my explore screen looks like, similar to the dashboard screen, only on this screen, there's the trending shows, popular shows, and most anticipated shows. And this is how it looks using Jetpack Compose. So I've got 3 composables, trending shows row, which also uses lazy row, similar to the dashboard screen. Then I've got popular shows row, which also uses lazy row, similar to the dashboard screen. And then I've got the most anticipated shows row, which also uses lazy row to allow me to have a list that's scrolling from left to right, a horizontally scrolling list. And then this is the show detail screen. This is how it looked before Compose. And this is how it looks now with Compose. So in this instance, I've got composables. So different composables representing different areas of the screen. So as you can see, I'm breaking down that screen into separate composables and then bringing it all together. So I've got a backdrop and title composable, which represents the backdrop image, the title there, as well as the status of whether it's running or it's ended. And then I've got a poster and metadata composable, which represents the poster, and then the data on the right-hand side, which is when it's airing, the genres, and then the attribution information. Then I'm using the standard text composable, which comes as part of Jetpack Compose to display my synopsis for that show. Then continuing on with the show details screen, this is how it looks below the synopsis. So you see there's a seasons button, then there's the cast information, then there's next and previous episode information below that. And this is how it looks using Jetpack Compose. So I've got my composable there that I created called show detail buttons, which will house the 2 buttons there that I have, the seasons button as well as the add favorite button. Then below it, I've got the show cast list composable, which also uses the lazy row. So that cast information is scrollable from left to right, horizontally scrolling. And then I created a composable called previous episode composable and also next episode composable to display the next episode, next and previous episode information, the synopsis and the title and so forth. Then below the previous episode information, I've got a ratings breakdown, which is data that is provided by the Trackit API. And this is how I created it using Jetpack Compose. So at the top there, the previously mentioned previous episode composable. And then below it, I created a composable called Trackit Rating Summary, which is a composable I created using the linear progress indicator as part of Jetpack Compose to display those meters there that you see there with the different progress or representing how many people liked a particular or rated that show in a particular way. And then on the left-hand side, the simple Jetpack Compose text composable to represent the overall score and the votes. So all that is part of this Trackit Rating Summary composable, which I created, which I can use on multiple screens if I want to. Then moving on to the show seasons episodes screen. So this is how it looks on the left-hand side. It is basically a list of cards with a picture of that episode as well as a synopsis of that particular episode. And this is how it looks in Jetpack Compose. So I was able to achieve this using a section heading text composable, which I created myself to represent headings for the different screens. So this is also another reusable composable that I can use across if I want to. And then my list there is represented by show season episodes, which uses lazy column. So lazy column allows me to have my list vertically arranged, so from top to bottom. And then each item within this lazy column is represented using show season episode card. So show season episode card is what you see there, that single card there with season 5, episode 1, and the synopsis, all of that, as well as the image. So that is represented using show season episode card composable. Then this is how my Trackit account screen looks like when the user is logged into their Trackit account. And this is how it looks using Jetpack Compose. So I've got, yet again, my section heading text composable, which I mentioned I used on the previous screen, and now I can also use it on this screen as well. I'm reusing composables. Then my list is represented using the favorites list composable, which uses a different kind of composable called lazy vertical grid. So if you're familiar with Flexbox or grid layout, then this is similar to that. So lazy vertical grid allows me to display a list in a grid format. Then each of my items within the lazy vertical grid is represented by a composable I created called list poster card. Then what still needs to be updated or converted? So I still need to update the toolbar, as I mentioned previously. And then I need to update the bottom navigation bar to be the Jetpack Compose navigation bar. So the toolbar as well to be the Jetpack Compose app bar. Then I need to migrate to Compose navigation. So as part of my Compose navigation migration, my bottom navigation bar and app bar will also be migrated as part of that. That is actually work in progress, which you will be able to see on my repository, which I will share shortly. Then I want to remove all the fragment files, because once all my screens are represented using composables, I will no longer need fragments. I will no longer need to use compose view at all, because all my views will now be within composables. Then I would like to replace surface with scaffold, because I'm going to be using the compose app bar, the compose bottom navigation bar. So I won't need surface as my main container anymore. Then I want to replace observer state with mutable state observation. This is purely my own personal preference. There's nothing wrong with observer state. You can use it. It is a function that is available to you to use if you have live data and you'd like to observe it as state. Observer state is available to do that. This is merely a personal preference. Then I'd like to add animations. Obviously, I'd like to make my app pretty, and I'd like to make the transitions between the different screens just look awesome. So Jetpack Compose makes animation addition also easier than what we're used to previously for those who are familiar with trying to add animations. Then most importantly, I'd like to add tests for all my composables. So resources, where can you find the information that I've shared? The official Compose documentation can be found at developer.android.com/jetpack/compose. Then the official Compose course, which I said I did, you can find it on the developer Android website /courses/pathways/compose. Then all the layout basics, understanding how to lay things out, like I was mentioning there with the vertical grid and all that information, you can find it on the developer Android website as well. Then state hoisting, which I mentioned is an important concept within Jetpack Compose. This is where you can find it. Then up next, TV Series Manager, the code is available as an open source project, and it's part of the Google Developers Dev Library. So this is where you can find it. So devlibrary.withgoogle.com, and you can just search for up next. It is one of the projects there. So it is also on GitHub. And from there, you can fork the project and contribute to it. Contributions are welcome from the community. So please just read my README as well as the contribution guidelines for more information if you'd like to contribute. And that image there is where you would find it. This is how it looks on the Google Developers website. So you can merely just click on view on GitHub if you want to see the code in more detail. So I have a branch right now where I'm currently doing the migration to the Compose navigation. So you can see all my changes there that I have so far. And I am Ahmed Tikiwa, Senior Software Engineer in Android at Luna. And you can find me on Twitter at Ahmed_Tikiwa. And thank you again for having me. I am open to any questions.
Thank you, Ahmed. So any questions from the audience?
I was asking, I have multiple questions, but
I think it's best that you come to the mic and ask a question instead of I'm repeating it.
Hi, Ahmed.
Hey, man.
I have multiple questions for Compose. So the first one you was saying about we have like XML and like our view, and then it will we will not navigate between them. But currently, as I can see, I think we have one view but multiple composable files, or because before we have like one XML and one view. Right now, like for details screen, how much files we have now?
I see. So what I have in place, right? What I was basically mentioning, and I'll show you here. Let me just go back to the particular slide. No, not that one. Okay, so within my fragment, right? So I'll start with the XML file. So I've got this XML file, right? Before I had all the Android views that we are all used to. So I had my text view inside it. I had my recycler view. I had a nested scroll view inside this. I had a constraint layout, which was wrapping all of it, right? So I removed all of that. And then I replaced it with compose view. So basically my intention was to convert my entire screen to Jetpack Compose. So remember I mentioned that there are two approaches to Jetpack Compose. There's a bottom-up approach, and then there's the top-down approach, right? So there is the approach where maybe you just want to change a button, or there is the approach where you just want to change a whole screen, okay? So in my case, my fragments are the ones that have all the logic, well, for navigating, right? So my fragments would react and receive an event from the composable because of state hoisting. So my fragments would receive the event from the composable, and then they would have the nav controller and then navigate to the different screens. So this is where all the navigation logic was in my fragment. So what I intend on doing now is that once I move to Jetpack Compose navigation, I'm not going to need my fragments anymore. I can now move my navigation logic to the composable, because the composable is also able to handle navigation. All I need to do is just pass the nav controller to the composable, and then my composable can navigate between each other. So I can then remove all my fragment files and then just have my composables navigating between each other. But right now on the normal main branch, so when you go and check out my code, you will see that it's my fragments that are navigating between each other. So search screen will navigate to show detail screen using the fragments. So search fragment will navigate to show detail fragment. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think this makes sense, but I mean, I think for my question is like about when we are totally convert from like XML to totally composable. So
Yeah.
do we need to have each component as a composable file or something like this? Because as I can see, I don't know, because there is some screen it will have so much complicated view as XML, but if I convert all of this in composable with all binding data or something like this, it will take so much. I mean, it will so much code in the view itself. So we just can, if we also convert every view as a file, we will have so much files. So I don't know if this like how we can solve this kind of problem.
Okay, so to answer your question, so basically you will create a file. So right now, can you see there the path for my fragment? It's UI search fragment. Okay. Yep. So within UI search, I created a composable called search screen. So search screen is a composable, and that entire file represents my entire search screen. And then, you know how in the Jetpack navigation that we're used to, we have to create a nav_graph.xml file, right?
Yeah.
And then within Jetpack Compose, you don't have to define your navigation graph like that anymore. You actually create another composable and then have all your composables as a list. So you define all your different composables that you're going to be navigating to. You pass them the arguments. So let's say if they are going to be deep linking between each other, and then all the navigation arguments, you can then pass them that way. And then so your navigation graph, which you create, is what is then going to be navigating between the different screens. So you don't have, you can create your navigation as a separate thing. So I can actually try and see if I can share my code so that this can actually make sense. Okay. Okay. So let me just share this. Okay. So let me know if you can see the code.
Yes, I can see the code now.
Okay. So I will show it to you this way. So here I've got, this is how I've defined my different packages. Okay, so this is in line with clean architecture. Okay, so here in my UI, then I've got navigation. Okay, then this is where I've defined navigation graph. So this is how you define your navigation graph. So I created a composable called navigation graph. And then I'm basically using animated nav host in order to just animate my navigation items. So this here, this is how you define your composable that will be within your navigation graph. So here I'm saying I have a composable, and this composable is called search screen. And search screen is now part of the navigation graph. Then here I define a route. So the route is a string. So it's similar to web now. So you can define it in any way, but it's a string. And then I define an enter transition and an exit transition. And then I can define how it's going to enter, popping, how to pop exit. And then this is where I define my composable. So my composable will come here in the Lambda. Then I had to do that for the dashboard screen. So for my dashboard screen, there I added another composable. For my explore screen, there I added another composable. And then see, does this make sense?
Yes. Can we combine between our nav like navigation as nav.graph and this one, or we have totally use one or only one of them at a time?
So you're going to need to move away from that. So, and this is how you define it. So I will show you. So I've got a screen called main. So main screen, right, which is a composable. And then main screen composable, here's where I was mentioning the scaffold. So as you can see, my scaffold layout takes in a top bar. So I created a top bar. Then it created a bottom bar. And then here is my navigation graph. So my main screen takes in a composable called navigation graph. And then my navigation graph is now responsible for navigating between the screens. This is all I had to do to define my main screen. And then navigation graph is smart enough to navigate between the different things, because bottom app bar automatically uses this navigation here. So it's tied together.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I think this is more informative for me. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Pleasure.
So, other questions from the audience? Everyone is happy? No questions? If not, I think you can definitely talk with Ahmed over Twitter or whatever social media he's using. Thank you, Ahmed. I think at first, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, everyone. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, we are happy to have you here. And hopefully we will have more people in the future. Also some, if you are in Berlin, try to come as well to our meetup. If you managed to be on the last Wednesday on the month, we will definitely try to do something. If not for bigger conferences like the DroidCon, which is happening in, when was it? July. I think the 1st to 3rd July, if I'm not wrong. July. Beginning of July. Nevertheless, like I said, thank you. And I think we will stop now the recording. And then we will do socializing on our side. And I wish you definitely a wonderful evening and enjoy your evening.
Thank you. Cheers, everyone.